What's going on, everybody? This is going to be another one of those educational videos that I've talked about before, and I'm going to be showing my NFL process in this video. Basically, it's a Tuesday night right now, super late on a Tuesday night. So we're pretty early on in the week. I'm just getting started with my NFL research for the week. And I'm just going to walk you guys through exactly what I do to find these NFL plays, some of the things I look for. I don't know if we're actually going to find a bet or not tonight. My goal is to find maybe one or two for you guys to show you how I do it. Early on in the week on Tuesday is a little difficult because you don't have all the lines out yet. On Wednesday, it's a little bit easier because you have most of the lines. And then obviously come Friday, you have a lot more that get posted too. And you have a lot more clarity on like injury situations and stuff too. But you won't be able to get as good numbers on a Friday or Saturday because of the line movements and the matchups and stuff. And the way the money steams everything. You guys have noticed it already. I'll make a bet on a Tuesday, and then come Friday afternoon, the players shifted 5 yards. So I'm just gonna walk you guys through. Obviously, I use Outlier like everything else. I do use another website. It's called fantasypoints.com. It is a paid website, and I specifically use their data dashboard here. I think it's called a data suite. I wouldn't personally go and pay for this if I were you. Outlier has some of this data on their website, but just because this is pretty expensive if you don't have a pretty large bankroll. But honestly, this website is really useful to use in tandem with Outlier to find these plays. So I'm going to show you guys my process. I have a template made for NFL. It's called NFL Yards. And essentially, all it is on Outlier, it's filtering for passing yards, receiving yards, and rushing yards. These are the main markets I like to focus on. And then my filters, see, I don't have any special filters on other than just the books I like to use, which are Prize Picks, Sleeper, Hard Rock, and Underdog. Those are just the only books that I, personally use myself. You could, expand this to all the other ones if you wanted to, but all it really does when you're selecting the books is it just shows what the lines are here. And my process for NFL isn't really too complex or anything. I'm mainly just looking for a really good matchup and a number that is just simply too low. But like I said, I don't know if we're gonna find a player or not here. But what I do is, I have all the yard props and all, and now I sort by the opponent rank. And I kind of just go through, but I also take into account how often they hit this year. So, like, Caleb Williams, he's got the best matchup theoretically based on yards allowed to quarterbacks for passing yards, but he's only gone over this number 50% of the time. So, like, something like that is like on a first look, I won't really click in and see if I want to bet it or not. I can go with the DJ Moore here, and I'll click in and I'll look at it here. And you see he's gone over this number 7 out of 10 games. The Steelers are allowing 186 receiving yards per game to wide receivers. Numbers 37.5. I prefer to take the top target getter on the team, but DJ Moore isn't too far off here at 16%. I'll scroll down and you see this is what I was talking about with like the receiving yards versus Pittsburgh. So Outlier only shows the last, I think, 5 weeks or so in their recent results, which is fine if you want like a small sample of it. But I like to see the entire year because basically what I want to do is I want to see how many wide receivers went for 38 or more yards against the Steelers this year. And have they been recent or were they like a long time ago and the Steelers defense kind of gotten better? So what I would do is I'll go over to the fantasy points data suite. I'll go to the receiving chart. I'll filter for opponent and I'll only look at games against the Steelers. And since we're later on in the season, I have to add a split of by week just so, if a player has faced the Steelers twice, it will split it up by game. And then I'll apply the filter here. And now it's going to show me, all the receiving performances against the Steelers. I'm specifically looking at wide receivers here, so I'll just go with the wide receivers. And now we see all the games for wide receivers against the Steelers. So wide receivers get a little bit more difficult because sometimes it does depend on where they're running the routes, whether they're a slot guy, whether they're an outside guy. So I'm not going to go too deep into that right now and on this DJ Moore play here. But, if you want to look for like a basic trend, Steelers have allowed 17 wide receivers to go over that 37.5 number in the first, I think it's 10, 11 games, however many they've played. I can't remember if they have their bye or not. I assume they did. So it's probably 10 games. Yeah, the bye was week 5, so 10 games against receivers, and it was 17 allowed of 30 or higher. Decent number, but that's not like the top in the league. They're more prone to giving up the big games to their number one guys. I'll just give you a brief overview on, but like I would go look at the routes run, and I'll see like, okay, does DJ Moore run his routes in the slot most often, or does he run them out wide? So I'll filter for the Bears. And then you see it shows here wide, slot, and it also shows the inline too. And you can kind of look and see, where DJ Moore is running his routes. It's a mix between the slot, but mostly out wide. So I'd also want to look at other receivers who ran their routes out wide. So I would go look at the Bengals because Jamar Chase had the big game. And Jamar Chase, he's mostly out wide. You can even look against opponent too. Like I could look at that specific game against the Steelers. So opponent Steelers, go to the split, go by week here, apply, and then it's going to show his couple of games against the Steelers. So you see he ran most of his routes out wide. He had 18 targets out wide in that one really big game back in week 7. So you can see you're looking for wide receivers who play out wide, run their routes out wide against the Steelers. So that's just kind of like a deeper overview how I look at receivers and receiving yards. At least if it's not the number one guy. If it's the number one guy, it becomes a little bit more clear. But receiving props are a little bit more variable and volatile compared to like a running back prop or a quarterback prop because there's a lot more mouths to feed on the receivers. Most of these teams are running 2 3 wide receiver sets. If you're the Rams, you're running a 3-1. I think it's a 1-3. It's 1 receiver and 3 tight ends. There's the 2 2s, 2 receivers, 2 tight ends. So a lot of these teams are running different sets, and there's always multiple pass catchers on the field. So you have to account for that. So receivers are the most difficult to predict, but if you could find a good spot, you can definitely take advantage of it. We'll take a look at this Drake May here against the Bengals. He's 251.5 yards. He's gone over this number in 8 out of 11 games. I could look at the away games, but it's such a small sample size that it doesn't really matter too much. Averaging 257.8. The spread is 8.5 though. So I would want to see Patriots wins if I wanted to go even deeper because they're probably going to win the game, which is 6 out of 9 games, which is still pretty solid. And then I'll just go back to the fantasy points data. So let me turn this filter off really quick. So I'll go back to fantasy points and I'll look at the passing report and I'll go look at games against the Bengals. So we'll go opponent Cincinnati Bengals, split by week because I want to see individual game performances. All right. So we'll see here Drake May's numbers 251.5, which is a pretty high number. But if I want to look at the alternate line of 199.5, I'll take a look at that here. Basically, the 259, it's only been 6 quarterbacks going over this number. 199, only 8 out of the 10 games that the Bengals have played. So it's probably something I would skip. I really want to look at something that's hitting at least 80% of the time, if not higher, against the team, especially as we get later on in the year, that number will decrease to 70%. But I'm really looking for the best of the best here because I don't want to bet fringe plays. I don't want to bet things that I have the most confidence in. Tight ends are a little bit different than wide receivers because there's generally only one tight end. So I'll look at this Dalton Schultz under number. He's only gone under 4 out of 10 games. And the Bills, they're only allowing 27 receiving yards to tight ends this season. So this is an interesting spot where you have a guy who's, I might ignore the trend and go by the matchup. So I'll go back to fantasy points here, look at the receiving matchup, and we'll go to the Bills as the opponent. So Buffalo Bills, same thing, split by week. I only want to look at the tight ends because those are the most important. So we have Schultz's number at 37.5. they've only allowed 2 tight ends to go over this number. It was Travis Kelce and Hunter Henry. That is a slight concern for me because they are 2 guys who are very involved in the passing game. Something that does stand out to me here, though, is that they haven't allowed more than 4 catches to a tight end. And let's take a look at what Schultz's receiving prop is. You got 4.5 on Sleeper. You can take the under on that. An underdog, it's kind of juiced a bit. Although he's gone over this number in 7 out of 10 games, the Bills have not allowed any tight ends to have over 4 catches against them in the entire season. So that is something that is definitely notable. And what I would do is I would just, I'd just save it and mark it for later, basically. Similar to how I do it with NBA, just going through all the plays, trying to find the best of the best. Let me try to find one play, like definitive play for you guys here before I spend, an hour going through this, because my process is the same for pretty much everything here. Like this Nick Chubb line, he's gone over this number 80% of the games this year. This 20.5 number is low, and it does concern me because he really isn't the number 1 running back anymore. You see his rush attempts are just declining. So this is probably a skip spot for me. What I would do here is I'd go and look at the Woody Marks number because he is technically the main runner now, essentially. And his number is 59.5, which is pretty high, I think. 58.5, no, maybe 57. It's probably not even up on Prize Picks yet for his main line. Or actually, it's 63.5 on Prize Picks. Look at that. That's a high number. You see, he's gone under this number in 9 out of 10 games, but the matchup's so good against the Bills. This is a spot where I'd probably still just skip, though, because he's gone under in all these games, and he's probably had some decent matchups in here. Like against the Titans, who was a good matchup. It was a good matchup against decent matchup against the Titans earlier. So 2 good matchups against the Titans. This is probably the best matchup he'll get the entire season. But not a spot I really want to take him. I try to just tread carefully with this stuff. And like I keep saying, I try to find the best of the best. Hunter Henry is a guy I like to look at a lot. The Bengals are giving up a lot of yards to tight ends. He's gone over the number 6 out of 11 games, which is a solid number. And then I'll go and look at the exact trend, but against the Bengals. So I don't have to do too much here because we were on the Bills. Now we'll go to the Cincinnati Bengals and just kind of see what we can find. So yards, the number is 38.5 we're looking at for Hunter Henry, which is a solid line for a guy who's as involved as him. He is his number 2 receiver on the team, which is good. And we've had, looks like 7 tight ends, 8 tight ends. What's the number? 38.5. So we had 7 tight ends go over that number. But let's look at the names of the guys too. So like Loveland, he's a pass catcher. Freiermuth, pass catcher. Laporta, pass catcher. Washington, kind of not really a pass catcher, but he had the big game against them. Fannon's a pass catcher. Hawkinson's a pass catcher. Kraft and Njoku, pass catchers. Like they faced a lot of really good tight ends this year. And the only one they really held, they held Strange to 17 yards. And they held Engram to 39 yards or 29 yards. But I might like the spot for Hunter Henry. If I look at the receptions, what's the number on Henry's reception? We don't have it yet because it's too early in the week, but just something to note on. I continuously go and look at these same players over and over again. Let me see if I can find a good play for you guys. Sometimes I even like sort by the hit rate, and I'll compare to the opponent rate too. But like the Kirk Cousins and the Sanders, you have like a 1-game sample on each of those, so you could skip it. JSN, 88.5 receiving yards against Tennessee, who's allowing the 29th most yards to receivers. This could be a really good spot for him. So this is where I'd go deep into the same kind of filters I was looking at before with the routes being run. I kind of know JSN, he's not really doing a ton in the slot this year. He's more of an outside guy. And then we'll go and look at the games against Tennessee this year. So Tennessee Titans, and I want to look at receivers. See how many guys went for over 88 yards against them. Probably not a ton. That's a big number. But they did have 5, and Puka went for 91, which, JSN's pretty much the same as Puka right now. But he's actually doing better than Puka at the moment. So this is a spot where I might consider it too. he gets the targets and everything. The yards have been there every game. We were actually on his longest reception for a while, and that number's 26.5, which is a solid number. Um, I wish it was a little bit lower. Yeah, I probably wish it was a little bit lower, but we'll focus on the receiving yards here for a bit. Um, yeah, I kind of like this spot for JSN. Good matchup. He's the number one guy. 37% target share is just insane. You know, 12 targets last game against the Rams. They're going to be on the road, so Seattle's probably not going to play as well, but there are decent favorites because Tennessee is that awful. So as a 2-touchdown favorite, not fully sure if I'd love that because the game could get out of hand and you won't need him to catch the receiving yards. But at the same time, if the game does get out of hand, it could be because he's racking up the receiving yards. But something to note on, as you're looking through. Let's see, the McCaffrey receiving yards. I'd want to look at the matchup against Carolina. They probably haven't given up that many receiving yards to running backs. A good matchup that I always take a look at, though, is the running backs against the Patriots. So we might as well just pull it up if they even have a line. Doesn't look like there is a line for Chase Brown yet. So we won't even be able to go there right now. We'll keep looking through. Let's see. We can go with, there's that Chubb line again. Tyler Shuck. He's had the few games. He had 280 yards there. We were on his rushing prop not too long ago, but I don't know if we have rushing yards just yet. Let's see. The Drake May we looked at. We could look at Brissett against Jacksonville. So he's gone over this number in all 5 starts this year. 239.5 is the number. Alternate line of 200 yards. So I'll look at both these over on fantasy points. So we're going to go opponent, Jacksonville, and then we're going to go split by week. We're going to see all the passing yards against the Jags this year. So we've had 7 go for 200 or more. Pretty much only 3 going for less. Seem right? 81 yards for Herbert? Yeah, maybe that he was that bad. I knew he was bad. I didn't realize it was that bad last week. With 7 out of 10 quarterbacks going over, is it 10? Yeah, 7 out of 10 quarterbacks is a really good number, going over the 200 number. So I'd probably go with this Brissett alternate line again, just because it's a really good spot for him. He's been smashing this number. As for the main line of the 240, is that the number? 239.5? Yeah, the main line of 239.5. It's just as strong, 6 out of 10. It's a fairly strong number. I wish it was a little bit more, but it is on the better end of things. So I would save this one and I'd come back to it later if I don't really find anything stronger with conviction. But yeah, hopefully you guys are getting something from this video. Hopefully I'm not just wasting my time on this. But I am giving, this is literally what I do. It's not anything extravagant, nothing really difficult either. But it is something like you do have to put in the time and the effort. So let's look at Travis Kelce. There's a good one. So Travis Kelce has been really good this year. 7 out of 10 going over the 51.5. We were on this last week against the Broncos in a fairly difficult matchup, but the number was low enough. Colts are giving up the second most yards per game to tight ends this year. Kelce is one of the main receivers. He actually is leading the team in target share. Now I want to see how many times the Colts have faced an elite tight end and have given up at least 50 yards against them. It could have been never. It could have been every time, but you won't know until you look. And that's what I'm trying to stress to you guys here. You have to go and look at this info. So, like I said, I don't know if we're going to find any official plays in this video because it's pretty early in the week, but this is literally giving you as in depth of my research that you're going to find. So this is exactly what I do. Okay. It's tight ends against the Colts. Gadsden had that massive game. McBride, 72 yards. Chiggy, 66 yards and 53 yards. Pitts only had 38 against them, but only on 5 targets and only 2 catches. They haven't really faced any other big tight ends. And it seems like any time they're facing a good tight end, he's getting decent yards against them. So I'm probably going to go in this Kelce play this week. Definitely on the alternate line, the 29.5. Is that 29.5? It's 8 out of 10, right? Yeah, it looks like 8 out of 10 individual games. So that's a pretty solid spot, that 29.5 for him. And I honestly think the regular line of 51.5 is a solid play too. So I'll mark that down, and we can always come back to it later. We'll take a look at Mark Andrews, the under. Not always going to be able to find overs here. I'm just looking. Jets gave up some yards here, so I'm going to skip on that under. This is exactly what I do. I just go through. The only thing that's deceiving is the opponent rake, because it shows the overall team. So, like, if I pull up the Mark Andrews, they're 10th in giving up receiving yards in general, but you have to go to the tight ends too. And ironically, they're 10th here too, but it's not always the same. So you do have to go click into it to see what it exactly is. It doesn't really matter as much for running backs, but even like if you're looking at like quarterback rushing yards. So if I find who's a rushing quarterback, we can pull up Drake May probably. Let's go to Mahomes. He runs a little bit here this year. All right, Mahomes rush yards. You see, the Colts are 5th best in the league at giving up rushing yards, 92.3 yards. That's including running backs, quarterbacks, receivers, anyone who has a rushing attempt. You go into the quarterbacks, it goes to 4th best in the league, 10.7 per game. This could be a decent spot, actually. Nope, never mind. Herbert went over that number. So this is kind of how I look at things. This is my exact process. Video, it's a bit long. And now we're getting into fringe stuff like 60% hit rates on the year. And I don't really want to mess with that. And it's early on in the week, so we're not going to get a ton of lines out right as we speak. But we did, mark a couple things that we like and want to circle back on, as the week goes on and progresses and stuff. You're not always going to have a bunch of bets early in the week. Sometimes it's just like 1 or 2. Sometimes it's none, and sometimes it's like 5 or 6. It really just depends on the week. It's like NBA. Some nights you might have 1 bet you like, and then some nights you might have 10 bets you like. It's just really, it's all slate dependent too. And it all depends on what you can find. There probably are better ways to do this than the way I do it, but this is just personally the way I do it. And obviously I have pretty good success with it, and it doesn't take as much time as it seems. I'd say all in all, in a full week of me finding NFL bets for like everything, I'd probably spend maybe like, I don't know, 3-4 hours in total the entire week, but it's spread out. Like I just spent 20 minutes here looking through. I marked down a couple things I like. Not sure if I'm going to bet them or not. I'll look at them a little bit deeper, but we have some options at the moment, and we'll always keep finding more as the week goes on. And you could even like, this is just where I start. I could always go to the longest reception, or like interceptions is a good one I like to look at. Like, okay, McCarthy's JJ's throwing a pick every game, but the Packers aren't picking off a lot of guys. Hurts isn't really throwing many interceptions, but Dallas isn't really getting them. So on an alternate line, that's good here. Same with Lamar. Could be a nice little parlay for a double up on Hurts and Lamar. It's just like, these are the ways I like to think. Go into the longest reception. I don't know if we'll have the Cowboys up just yet. We do. So, we got our guy CeeDee Lamb back down to 24.5. That's a lock. Like, we're betting this bet. This is a no-brainer. Games with Dak Prescott. And last 2 seasons, he's gone over this number. 7 out of 10, but Dak's hurt. CeeDee's hurt. It's really, 7 out of 7, and then 5 out of 6 because he did miss that last game. But 24.5, they give us discount. Thank you very much. So there's one play, I guess, for you guys. CeeDee Lamb, you guys knew it was coming, but hopefully you guys like this video. I don't know if you'll even watch this to the end. I'm also undecided if I'm going to just post this for the VIPs or post this for everybody. But this is, at least I'll post it for you guys initially. And I'll post it like on a later date for everyone to see it. But yeah, this is my process for the NFL. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And let me know if you like this video too. If you liked me going through this kind of stuff, if you find it helpful, let me know. These are pretty low effort to do, but because I'm doing it anyways, so I might as well just record it. But yeah, let me know if you have anything. Thanks, guys.